Okay, let's dive into this. In the summer of 2026, the footballing world witnessed what has to be one of the most astonishing underdog stories in the entire history of the sport. We're talking about Cape Verde. This tiny island nation didn't just qualify for their first ever FIFA World Cup, but they literally shocked the globe by fighting their way into the knockout stages against some of the absolute giants of the game. In this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how the Blue Sharks pulled off this monumental upset. To really understand this phenomenal achievement, we're going to look at 1. An improbable World Cup dream. 2. The blueprint for success. 3. The power of diaspora. 4. The soul of Cape Verde. And 5. Shocking the world. We'll see exactly how smart economics, a massive global diaspora, and a deeply rooted culture all collided to create this historic sporting achievement.
All right, starting with Section 1. An improbable World Cup dream. World Cup 2026. Let's look at the sheer geographical and demographic reality of this tiny archipelago.
To truly grasp the magnitude of what this team achieved in North America, you just need to consider this number right here, 525,000. That's the entire population of Cape Verde. To put that into perspective, you could easily fit their whole country into a handful of large football stadiums. When they punched their ticket to the 2026 tournament, they immediately became the second smallest nation by land area and population to ever qualify for a World Cup. They were overcoming massive, deeply ingrained structural and resource disadvantages that usually keep microstates miles away from football's biggest stage.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of the challenge when you look at their opponents in Group H. On one side, you've got Cape Verde with its 500,000 people and, frankly, highly limited domestic resources. On the other side, you have traditional footballing royalty, Spain, an absolute European juggernaut, and Uruguay, historical World Cup winners. I mean, this was the ultimate David versus Goliath narrative playing out right on the pitch. You got to ask yourself, how on earth does a country of this size even begin to compete against these powerhouses?
Well, that brings us to Section 2, the blueprint for success, funding and tactics.
Because let's be real, passion and national pride alone don't buy plane tickets or build training facilities, right? We need to look at how this microstate practically solved its funding and infrastructure problems to reach the global stage. The secret engine behind this incredible rise was strategic financial backing. Through the FIFA Forward program, which pumped a whopping $1 billion into Africa, the Cabo Verdean Football Federation finally got the resources it so desperately needed. We're talking funding for brand new artificial pitches, covering the immense, crippling costs of international travel for their players, and making vital renovations to their national stadium. This was an absolute game changer. It allowed the Federation to stop worrying about short-term survival and start focusing on long-term sustainable development for their 2025 qualification campaign.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how that off-field stability translated into intense on-field tactical discipline under head coach Pedro Brito, affectionately known to everyone as Babista. He knew for a fact he couldn't just outpossess technically superior opponents. Instead, he deployed a super rigid 4-2-3-1 formation. They relied on intense zonal defensive compactness, basically absorbing pressure like a sponge, and then launching rapid counterattacks to exploit the wings, particularly using their incredibly experienced captain Ryan Mendes. They typically held only 40 to 45% possession, but man, their quick transitions made them incredibly lethal and so hard to break down.
Moving right along to Section 3, the power of diaspora, global talent.
Tactics and pitches are great, for sure, but you still need elite, international caliber players to actually execute those plans. Cape Verde ingeniously bypassed its small domestic talent pool by looking outward, tapping into its massive global immigrant population. Because of centuries of emigration, there are actually more Cape Verdeans living abroad today than on the islands themselves. The Federation actively went out and recruited dual national players scattered across Europe and the Americas. And for many of these guys, choosing to play for the Blue Sharks was a deeply personal decision. French-born defender and MLS Cup champion Steven Moreira hit the nail on the head when he said, "It's incredible. I moved to another country and made my family proud." Connecting with their heritage and representing their family's roots on the grandest stage literally meant everything to them.
And we see this exact same sentiment echoed across the entire squad. Here's a really powerful reflection from Roberto Lopez, an Ireland-born center back who became a totally crucial anchor for their defense. He noted, "It's made me a better player, it's made me a better person, and I've experienced things I never would have in my life before." I think this highlights something truly magical about this team, you know? International football took this diverse, globally scattered group of talented individuals and seamlessly united them into a fierce, cohesive brotherhood.
Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 4, the soul of Cape Verde, culture and emotion.
So, we've talked about the logistics, the funding, the player recruitment, but there's an emotional heartbeat that unites this entire nation and its diaspora, making this team just so incredibly special. To truly understand Cape Verde, you absolutely have to understand Saudade. It's this deeply ingrained cultural concept, a really complex emotion mixing nostalgia, longing, regret, and tenderness for something lost. It's often referred to as the poetics of departure. Because Cape Verde is an archipelago so defined by generations of emigration, Saudade is the emotional anchor. It's this unseen, powerful force that calls these emigrant players back to their island roots, and it's exactly what fuels their incredibly passionate, dancing, and singing fan base that we all saw lighting up the stadiums during the tournament.
This feeling of Saudade is perfectly captured in Morna, the traditional music of Cape Verde, which actually conquered the world long before their football team ever did. Emerging back in the 19th century on the island of Boa Vista, Morna evolved from a local folk dance. By the early 20th century, poets like Eugenio Tavares added high poetry to it. Then, in the 1990s, the legendary Cesaria Evora, famously known as the Barefoot Diva, brought Morna to the global stage. And by 2019, it was officially recognized as a UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage. Just like their football team, Cape Verde used its cultural soft power to completely transcend its small borders, proving that resilience and soul can absolutely capture the world's attention.
Which brings us to the climax, Section 5, Shocking the World, Group H and the Knockouts.
All these carefully woven threads, the smart FIFA funding, the brilliant diaspora recruitment, and the unifying soul of Saudade, they all came together for an absolutely stunning, undefeated Group H run in North America. So the crucial point is this undefeated record right here. They opened their historic debut by holding the mighty Spain to a 0-0 draw, instantly grabbing their first ever World Cup point. No way, right? Then, they stunned everyone with a wildly entertaining 2-2 draw against Uruguay, where Kevin Pina and Helio Varela scored Cape Verde's historic first-ever World Cup goals. Finally, they secured another gritty 0-0 draw against Saudi Arabia. Their defensive brilliance, anchored by players like Vozinha in goal, completely neutralized some of the most dangerous attackers on the planet.
With those 3 hard-fought points, Cape Verde officially became the smallest nation ever to advance to the knockout stages of a World Cup. In the round of 32, they faced the ultimate test, the defending champions Argentina. And guys, they didn't flinch for a single second. They pushed Lionel Messi and the Argentine squad to the absolute brink. Goals from Deroy Duarte and Sidney Lopez Cabral literally forced the game into extra time. Ultimately, they suffered a heroic 3-2 defeat after a completely heartbreaking 111th minute own goal. But honestly, in that defeat, their legacy was forever cemented. They went toe-to-toe with football royalty and proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that they absolutely belonged.
This incredible journey leaves us with one massive, provocative question to ponder. If a nation of just 525,000 people can shake the very foundations of world football with smart funding, diaspora unity, and a shared cultural soul, who is going to be the next giant killer? Cape Verde showed us that with the right blueprints, even the absolute smallest dreams can become a massive reality on the world's biggest stage. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep your eyes peeled for the next great underdog story.